Sometimes evil creeps into your life.
He was talking to the spirits, as he called them. He was talking to voices.
Sometimes it's invited.
Dorothea called it a room that was cursed.
Disappearances were quite common.
And when tenants go missing one by one, sometimes it's death knocking at the door.
The cute little Victorian house became nothing more than a house of horrors.
In the well-tended yard of a Sacramento boarding house,
Might find some garbage in there.
police unearth a grisly secret that's been buried for decades. Sacramento might be the state capital of California, but by the mid-'80s, some of the mansions and their residents have seen better days. With one exception. Dorothea Puente's boarding house shines like a beacon of hope for the city's down and out.
Oh, good morning, Joan. Oh, thank you, dear.
Dorothea cut a very matronly, motherly figure. She was fairly well known within the system as having a nice home, lots of rooms for people, in a nice location, and everything was as neat as a pin. The house was always painted nicely. It looked really good.
It had that gingerbread feel, and it was perfect for a boarding house. It was actually pretty deluxe.
So in 1988, when a city outreach worker is searching for housing for a new client, Dorothea's boarding house is one of her first choices.
So, I understand you have room for another boarder.
Yes, in fact, I do, yes.
That boarder is Burt Montoya. When he's found on the streets, he's in deep conversation.
He was talking to the spirits, as he called them. He was talking to voices.
Aside from his spirits, Burt is utterly alone in the world. The 50-year-old Costa Rican has no family and spends his nights at a shelter for drunks known as Detox.
Detox is a corrugated metal structure. It's just a warehouse, basically, with a concrete floor and vinyl mats on the floor, lined up on the floor. And it's first come, first serve. So with people that have nowhere else to go, and the police would bring inebriates there, and instead of putting them in jail, just bring them to Detox. Kind of last ditch before you end up on the street.
If Burt were to end up on the street, he'd be in trouble. He suffers from schizophrenia.
When you took the Mellaril that the doctor gave you, did the voice go away? The voices that talked to you, did they go away that time with the medicine?
No, they ain't no way.
They didn't go away.
The social worker, she was right there with him and immediately recognized what his problem was and kind of took him under her wing. And so she kind of made it her mission to help him because he was sleeping in this warehouse with 60 other men on a mat on the floor.
Somewhere along the way, Burt loses his Social Security number. He can't collect benefit checks, so there's nowhere else he can afford to go.
And so she set out to get him an ID so that he could get some benefits so that he could sleep somewhere in a real bed.
He had a mind of his own. He needed a lot of care, not physical care, but watching and taking care of.
Well, if we could find a good boarding house for you, would you prefer to go there? Okay, we'll try and do that.
The outreach worker had found him the perfect spot.
When they had discovered this house, how ideal it seemed.
I'm sure he's going to be able to fit in beautifully, yeah.
I think she had 3 or 4 different places, and with Dorothea, it immediately clicked.
He also speaks English, but he has a Spanish background.
Okay, all right. Well, I have some Spanish blood in me too.
You do?
Well, Puente, of course, being my last name. Yes, I go back. Yes, I do. Right. Oh, hello, Burt. Come on in.
Dorothea welcomes Burt into the house, despite his history of mental illness, perhaps sensing his gentle nature.
He was such a kind, lost soul. If he found money on the street, he would turn it in. Once he found $200 at Detox, and he handed it into the office. If someone liked his shirt, he'd take his shirt off and give it to them. I mean, he was just a very generous, uncalculating person.
Burt was not a drinking man. A lot of the people in the home were. Most of them on some sort of prescription drug that was somewhat impairing.
Oh, John, this is Burt.
John Macaulay and Dorothea were quite close. In a sense, he was kind of her right-hand person during that period of time.
People called him the major domo. John Macaulay was really a character. He was kind of a larger-than-life, bombastic, smart-mouthed guy who was also quite a drunk.
Ben, this is Burt. Burt, this is Ben. He lives here too.
Ben Fink was Jewish. It was an odd thing because he had a tattoo of a swastika. That was just his way of saying, don't mess with me. Ben Fink's pattern was that when he got his benefit checks, he'd have a bender. He'd drink until the money was gone. And then he'd sober up and wait for the next round of checks.
John? This is Burt, John. He's gonna live here too. This is John, Burt.
Hi, John.
Yeah.
John, I like your hat. It's the same.
No, this is Burt.
Burt.
You're
Burt.
John.
I'm John.
That's all right.
And your hat.
John Sharp lived next door, downstairs, next door to Ben Fink. But John Sharp was not a drunk. His vice was poker. He got out of the hospital, had a bad back, and Dorothea bought a special bed for him. So he had a debt, if you will, to Dorothea.
Dorothea does not actually own her Victorian boarding house. She rents it from her good friends, the Ordoricas.
Cuando nos íbamos a mover, me preguntó, Ricardo, ¿por qué no me dejas la casa sola? Yo te pago la renta. Y le dije que sí.
My sister and I would go over there and clean the house, clean up after the tenants. Her garden was just beautiful. She loved to plant flowers. She was just very loving.
Como una familia, la veíamos como una familia.
We actually called her Thea.
Toda la gente hablaba muy bien de ella. Nosotros la queríamos mucho. Toda la gente decían la doctora Dorothea Puente. En el radio le dedicaban a la doctora.
One of 14 children, raised in Mexico. She had such a persona at one point in her life. She was at a charity ball, and then Governor Jerry Brown crossed the room to kiss her on the cheek and ask her to dance. So she had a reputation as being kind of a philanthropist in the Hispanic community.
Dorothea lives with drug addicts, alcoholics, disturbed individuals. So she has to have strict rules to handle them.
Ben, you're too late. Ben, you are acquainted with the rules. You are too late.
No coffee.
No.
Dorothea did run a really tight ship. If someone missed a meal, they were out of luck until the next meal.
Lord, for your benefit.
She was a tough old bird because she could handle these people pretty well.
She was known to get up very early and work in the garden first. Then she had breakfast on the table, I believe, at 5:30. So if you wanted to eat, you had to get up and have breakfast.
Dorothea doesn't drive. She relies on a local taxi driver who quickly becomes part of the daily routine.
Very demanding from the get-go. Number one, be punctual. Number two, do what I tell you. And we'll get along just great. She was generous almost to a fault, you know, especially a woman to woman. I mean, she'd tip very nicely and make sure there was enough time on the meter, you know, to make it worthwhile.
She would go to Lumberjack and buy gardening supplies, to get drugs at the pharmacy. On Sundays, go to church. She had this very set routine.
Dorothea is always on the lookout for the city's down and out.
Hello there.
She encourages them to move into her F Street house.
So there's the address, just in case you're interested.
She'd come and sit next to someone and ask them about their benefit checks and their disability, and she was very sympathetic about their heart problems, and say, well, you know, you could probably get more money if you did this and this, and she was conversant about how to work the system. And then she would invite them to come and move into her boarding house or see how she could help them in some way.
I'm sure you like it. Come and see it.
She referred to them as throwaway people. She said everybody else has abandoned them, and I've taken them in. And I thought it was a charitable situation that she had created for people that had nowhere else to go.
Dorothea had a great reputation in Sacramento.
Era una mujer muy inteligente, muy conocida de toda la sociedad de Sacramento, el sheriff de la policía, y el obispo, el gobernador, legisladores.
Active in local political circles. Always seemed to have a pile of money.
But life at Dorothea Puente's boarding house is not as harmonious as it seems.
All I kept hearing about was how messy they were, and she couldn't tolerate uncleanliness.
And with Burt's arrival on the scene, things get worse.
She was fuming. I mean, that damn son of a you have no idea what he did.
Burt Montoya finally has a cozy place to live. A Sacramento boarding house run by his generous but strict landlady named Dorothea Puente.
Hey, Burt. Well, you're looking well today.
Yes, he does, doesn't he? Oh, he's my honey bear. Oh.
I grabbed your mail.
Okay.
Burt thrives in his new environment.
Dorothea did things for Burt that she didn't do for other people. She cleaned him up, she gave him new clothes, and she kind of boasted about, you know, how he called her mama. Everyone was amazed at how well he was doing.
What a unique place for Burt to be, because Dorothea seemed so kindly, so understanding, so full of empathy, and was the kind of person they thought would be able to handle Burt in a nice way.
He was almost kind of a showpiece for her, to show how compassionate she could be and how she could really turn someone around.
He kind of saw her off, and he greeted her when she came home. He just absolutely adored her, and I'm telling you, she took good care of him.
But not everyone is happy about Burt being there. The other tenants grow jealous. They pay $375 a month for a single room and 2 hot meals. Burt enjoys that and more on credit alone.
For Burt, she actually set up a tab at Joe's Corner Bar, but she didn't do that for anyone else.
Chin chin.
Dio la orden que en el Joe's Corner, en el bar, le dieran 3 cervezas nomás, y que después ella los pagaba. Así él venía diario y tomaba medicina, venía y como que tenía crédito, pues.
If Burt is Dorothea's pet, Ben Fink is her problem child.
Ben Fink was kind of a notorious drunk. He was someone who had been checked into hospitals with alcohol levels that were beyond mortality. I mean, they were death-defying alcoholic levels in his blood.
And Ben Fink can sometimes make a lot of noise.
John Sharp heard this thump, thump, thump down the stairs. And he couldn't identify it. He thought it was creepy.
Ben doesn't usually help out in the garden. Another reason Dorothea doesn't like him. Burt, on the other hand, is happy to chip in.
That's good.
Dorothea had a relatively small yard, both back and front, and it was always meticulously maintained.
But the owners of the house are not always pleased with her so-called improvements.
Oh, hi there. How are you?
Una vez que fui a la casa, encontré un patio de cemento.
Yo tenía muchos rosales, me gustan mucho los rosales. Cuando nos movimos yo dejé todas mis plantas ahí y cuando fui que vi que estaba ya diferente, le dije, Tea, ¿qué pasó? ¿Quitó los rosales? Dice, sí, no me gustan los rosales. Le decía yo a mi esposo que por qué le daba tanta autoridad a que le estábamos rentando.
Oh, it's good to see you. Good to see you. I'm going to get back my flowers now. You know, first day at work.
Dice, oh, ella dice que para que se vea la casa mejor. Le dije, a mí no me gusta eso. Yo tenía diferente como ella estaba haciendo.
Okay, here you go. Get over there. Get back to work now. Yes, that's quite good. I'm very pleased with that.
I mean, she was always busy with her yard.
It seemed like every 5 or 6 months, she's going to Lumberjack for the same items over and over again.
But it soon becomes evident that Ben Fink isn't just neglecting to help. He's gone. Nobody's surprised he only lasted 3 months under Dorothea's strict rules.
A lot of these people were somewhat mentally impaired, so there was a reason, ostensibly, for them just packing up, or not even packing up, but just hitting the road. So disappearances were quite common.
If it didn't work out, she might kick them out after 2 weeks. She was mercurial in that way.
So mercurial, in fact, that later that summer, 6 months after Burt moves in, he falls out of his mama's favor.
He became so drunk on one afternoon that 3 other men from the house had to come and bring him back and practically carry him back. They described him as blowing bubbles. So I'm wondering if maybe he had something else in his system at that point.
It's not clear whether Burt's drunk, high, or had a seizure, but it infuriates Dorothea. She does not tolerate this kind of behavior, not with Ben Fink, and not with Burt Montoya.
She got in my cab and she told me, that damn son of a bitch, you have no idea what he did. She was fuming. I mean, if smoke could come out her ears, it would have. And I thought, wow. She was very, very protective of Burt. That's when I knew something was wrong.
It's enough to drive Burt out of the F Street house that August and back to detox.
And he showed up there one day and he was crying. And he was telling him, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back.
But Burt's departure doesn't expel the boarding house's demons.
Dorothea called it a room that was cursed.
She died in Dorothea Puente's house. The cause of death was suicide.
There's something sinister lurking beneath the cozy exterior of Dorothea Puente's boarding house. Around the time that Burt Montoya takes off, tenants notice a terrible smell seeping out of the empty bedroom upstairs.
Do you smell something?
Why, yes, I do, as a matter of fact. I have noticed it. But let's hope it doesn't come from my pancakes.
It's not only the tenants who notice the terrible smell. So do the owners, who often stopped by to visit.
Sí olía podrido. Olía podrido ahí.
To be honest, I just thought it was maybe the tenants. Because some tenants, they wouldn't bathe. I'd say on a daily basis.
Dorothea tried to say that it wasn't her house that was smelling. She said that she thought it was the neighbors, that it was the sewer backed up. She complained, oh, it's really bad. And in the meantime, she had been shampooing the carpet, and John Sharp could hear her above him, back and forth, back and forth. She was shampooing the carpet. Dorothea called it a room that was cursed.
In fact, a few years before, one of her tenants died in that very room.
Well, Ruth Monroe lived with Dorothea Puente many years before this all occurred. She died in Dorothea Puente's house. The cause of death was suicide.
The next door neighbor was really angry about this smell. He said that they'd turn on the air conditioner and it would suck the smell inside, and they had to go outside to get away from it. The Department of Health was summoned. They came and did a tour of the house, had her sign something that there was nothing wrong.
After just a few nights in detox, Burt's brought back to the F Street house.
Burt, make yourself useful. Take that carpet in the back.
They felt that he'd gotten a nice place to stay, someone to take care of him, someone to watch over him.
Burt asked him to drop him off a couple of blocks away from the house so that Dorothea wouldn't know that he had left, so she wouldn't be mad.
But she is mad.
Her favorite expression was, when they cross me, they don't cross me a second time. She was a very edgy, very angry person.
Burt avoids Dorothea.
He would go to Joe's Corner Bar. He had been drinking quite a bit.
Oh, I am such a lucky woman to have my two Johnnies with me.
You're 10, Dorothea. Good morning.
Oh, good morning, John. Oh, thank you, dear. That's very nice of you.
Aren't we going to wait for Burt? Red Hat Burt.
Oh, Bert's not with us anymore. He has decided to go and join his family in Mexico.
About 2 months after Burt's detox visit, his outreach worker tries to get in touch with him.
She had gone over to the boarding house and contacted Dorothea, and Dorothea had told her that Burt left with relatives.
Dorothea, with Burt, had this elaborate story that she'd taken him to Mexico, and her family liked him so much that they kept him down there. And Dorothea said, oh, don't worry, he calls me every week. And so she said, well, when's he going to be back? And she started pushing, well, when am I going to see him?
Well, I think she knew Burt. I think she had been with him long enough as his social worker that she knew that he wouldn't have just picked up and left like that. So she contacted police.
Detective John Cabrera is given the job of investigating Burt's disappearance.
Miss Fuente.
Yes.
Detective John Cabrera. We spoke on the phone a little bit
That's
earlier.
right, we did.
Yes.
How'd you do?
I'm doing very good, and yourself?
I'm fine. Hello.
The detectives came over to Dorothea's house with kind of an apologetic air. They didn't have a warrant.
Is there a place we could go and talk?
Oh, certainly.
Yes?
Certainly. Would you like to come through to my dining room?
Thank you.
Everything that I needed to do, I needed her permission, which required us to get her permission to search, and it required us to get her permission to even enter into her residence, in which she did invite us in. She was very receptive to us being there. She realized what we were there for, you know, about Burt.
It's a very nice house you've got here. Do you mind if I just take a quick look around?
Not at all. You go right ahead.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll be with you guys in a second.
She was very polite. She was as calm and cool as a cucumber. I searched the premises, all on top. I looked through everything. I didn't find anything. Of course, I was looking for Burt, and Burt was a man of 6 feet tall, 250 pounds. In the bedroom, I came across a pill vial, and it had a name on it, and it wasn't Dorothea Puente. So I searched through everything, and after I finished searching, a brief search, I came out and I thanked her for letting me search. And then I said I had one other request.
Oh, and we need to check out the garden. We'll be digging around a little bit. We'll be careful. You don't mind, do you?
Oh, well, no, of course not.
She really was very helpful.
Detective Cabrera isn't just grasping at straws. He's acting on a tip from the outreach worker.
One of the things that she did mention to me was the fact that we should be taking some shovels. And I asked her why. She said, well, she'd driven by on other occasions, and there were mounds of dirt that she saw. And she said it looked like somewhat of a burial ground. But when we got to the residence, you know, we didn't see anything like that. But we took the shovels.
A gentleman? Detective?
Yes.
Oh, I was just thinking that I could call some friends and, you know, they could come and help with the digging, and you could come back tomorrow.
No. Don't worry about it. We'll just be digging.
Here is a person who wants to bring people over to do our digging, you know, to save us time. I just simply said, if she didn't mind, then I would like to just go ahead and do the digging ourselves. And we started digging 3 holes.
Might find some garbage in there.
What?
Garbage. Junk, man. Sure luck.
After 3 holes, they're thinking, this isn't going anywhere.
We kept coming across eggshells and pieces of food and what appeared to be garbage, you know, discarded garbage. I was pulling out of the ground these small pieces of what appeared to be leather, and they were opaque in color. And I actually made a pile next to the hole. As I dig down, I hit this what I believe to be a tree root. So I take the shovel, and I mean, I'm just banging on this thing because I want to dislodge it so we can dig deeper. And I start pulling on what I believe to be a tree root. And as I'm pulling and pulling and pulling on this, it breaks loose. And I'm holding in my hands what appears to be a human leg bone. And I mean, it was just kind of utterly shocking. There was no doubt that it was human. It was human remains.
Burt Montoya has been missing for more than 2 months. Police are digging up his landlady Dorothea Puente's backyard, and they've made a gruesome discovery.
Well, then it all made sense. What I'd been pulling out is somebody's clothes, and there was a good possibility that the opaque leather-looking material was actually human flesh.
Miss Puente, would you know anything about this?
She was in shock that I found this. And I asked her about it, and she had no clue, no information, how that ever was there. What was obvious to me is that this wasn't Burt. You know, Burt was only gone for 3 months. And obviously, these were bones of someone that had been here, you know, for some time. I mean, I'd been in homicide since 1980, and I was aware that, you know, people would find bones, you know, in these backyards dating back to the early 1900s, 1920s. It wouldn't be out of the ordinary, given the date of how old this neighborhood was, that going back many, many years, that when people passed away and didn't have the money to take them to a cemetery or something, they could bury them in the yard. I wanted to continue on and wanted to continue digging, but obviously we had to stop at that time and notify the coroner.
We need to start a flower base.
The next day, police return to the scene, and so does half the town.
The news has gotten out that within a mile of the state capitol, a body has been discovered in a little old lady's garden.
The crowd grew bigger, and the news got out. And then we saw trucks with satellite dishes. And the crowds became so big, we had to actually cordon off and close the entire street in front of the residence. There were vendors showing up, hot dog vendors, ice cream vendors. We even had t-shirt vendors, people that were already making t-shirts. You know, and on the front of the t-shirt was a little old lady holding a shovel, and the caption read, "I dig Sacramento."
Thank you.
Detective Cabrera, Dorothea wants to see you.
Miss Puente.
Am I under arrest?
Of course not, of course. Where are you asking?
Would you mind if I went and got a coffee where my nephew works at the hotel around the corner?
Yeah, sure, of course, no problem. Come with me.
Thank you so much.
She'd been cooperative. She'd let us do exactly what I asked. And so I said, okay, I'd walk her down and right over to the hotel to make sure nobody bothered her or anything. I started digging again. In less than 20 minutes, I dug down. I knew I hit something.
Sergeant!
She walked away, and then just a few minutes later, they discovered another body in the yard.
John? I definitely have something here.
My lieutenant came running over, and the first thing he asked me was, where was Dorothea? You know, I just thought, oh no.
She waltzed away from the scene, the crime scene, wearing her red coat and her purple pumps under her pink umbrella. I mean, she was the antithesis of understatement.
I just had this very empty feeling in the back of my neck. The joke was on me.
She called a taxi. She paid him $60 to drive her to Stockton, which is south of Sacramento, down the interstate. There she caught a bus and she went to LA.
All along, her plan was to flee.
In quick succession, the cops find 3 more bodies.
It was like every time we'd take something down, like the wooden patio or the shed, we were finding bodies.
By this time, Dorothea Puente is long gone. In the yard, remains of tenant after tenant are unearthed. Ben Fink is identified by his swastika tattoo. Dorothy Miller, an alcoholic with long-term mental problems. Betty Palmer, but police never find her feet, hands, and head.
I searched everywhere, every possible, even under the house. I crawled under the house and looked in the crawl space area. To this day, we haven't found them, and we have no idea where they could be or what even happened to them.
Aside from the headless Betty Palmer, police also discover the bodies of Vera Martin, James Gallup, and Leona Carpenter. In Leona's case, she may have been buried alive.
What it looked like to me is that she was put in the ground shallow, and that it appears that the legs, the victim possibly kicked her legs up, and in doing so, compacted the dirt up around her legs, forming like a little bridge.
The cops take another look inside.
The only thing that was odd to me was the carpet. One thing I'll never forget is when I pulled that carpet back, the most grotesque odor came out. And I knew that it was putrefying body fluids. The fact is, there were people that were living there. And so it was always based on opportunity. When was the best opportunity to put the body into the ground? So these bodies would have to lie there. until a period or a time when she could get him into the ground. I was in those graves. There was no odor. There was no smell. But in the death room, the carpet, the body fluid, that would knock you over. Things started to fall in place. Now, with the finding of the bodies, the rooms, the fluids became nothing more than a house of horrors.
And their main suspect is still on the run and ready to strike again.
Like a duck to water, she found the bar, then she found the guy.
They had several drinks together, and he found her charming.
To life.
Police have discovered the bodies of 7 people at Dorothea Puente's boarding house. But Dorothea herself has disappeared. The investigation into this real-life Hotel California reveals decades of deceit.
As far as Burt is concerned, I have a little bit of Spanish blood.
You do? Oh, well, Puente.
Exactly.
Dorothea Puente is born Dorothea Helen Gray in Redlands, California.
Dorothea was not Hispanic at all, but she was able to present whatever persona she wanted to. She was really only 59, but she pretended she was older. She told people she was 70, and with her white hair and without her teeth, she could look 70. Dorothea was such a chameleon.
A chameleon who serves her first jail term in the 1940s for forgery, and in 1978 is again convicted for forging stolen checks. Then in 1982, a woman named Ruth Monroe dies after moving into Dorothea's boarding house. At the time, it was deemed a suicide. Now, the authorities allege it's Dorothea's first murder.
This was an older woman. There's no reason to believe it's a murder. So they take her body to the morgue. The autopsy was done. It wasn't a heart attack. So then you have 2 choices. It's either suicide or murder. But there's no crime scene. And I think that Dorothea learned that you can get away with murder if there's no crime scene, if there's no link to you actually murdering that person.
Also in 1982, Dorothea is convicted for drugging and robbing elderly men.
So I was thinking that if you were interested
She had 3 years in prison to think about that. That Ruth Monroe didn't send her to prison. The people that she drugged and robbed and left living sent her to prison. So what's her solution? To kill them and get rid of the body.
When released and on parole in 1985, Dorothea meets up with an Oregon man, Everson Gilmouth.
You know, he just disappeared and subsequently was found along the Sacramento River in a homemade coffin. And it wouldn't be until all of this came up in 1988 that we were able to even put him at the residence.
She disposes of Everson Gilmouth, but leaving a body by the side of the river isn't very safe. The next person she killed, I believe, was Betty Palmer. That's the woman that had no head, hands, or feet. At that point, I think she decided she needed to disguise the body. So I think that you can see a progression in Dorothea's skill as a murderer.
On November 14th, 1988, police identify Burt Montoya as one of the 7 bodies in Dorothea's yard.
Something happened that caused him to become unraveled and upset and flee the premises, wanting to stay at the shelter where he previously came from. Whatever triggered this fear in him to not wanting to go back is that the possibility he stumbled upon something at the house, that he saw something.
I think it's very troubling to everyone who knew him to think about what scared him enough to make him walk all the way across town, several miles, to go back to detox. When at Dorothea's, he had his own bed, his own room, his TV, he had meals cooked for him. So we don't really know what spooked him.
Burt had become probably very difficult for Dorothea to handle, and he could be a problem. He might even bring the police. She couldn't allow Burt to do what he did, or to bring attention upon the house, or to bring attention to her. And she apparently felt there was only one thing to do.
As the cops continue to dig up her past, Dorothea herself is on the run, but old habits die hard.
Like a duck to water, she found the bar, then she found the guy.
It appears to be a scotch. I'll have what this gentleman's having, please.
Charles Wilgus was this man's name, and he found her charming.
They had their conversation about Social Security money and how she could probably find him more, you know, because she knew all the rules.
They had several drinks together, and she suggested that maybe they could have Thanksgiving together, and so they had a date.
To life.
At one point, she apparently had asked him to come on back to her hotel and they could discuss more. And he just kind of, nah, that's okay, I'm not going to. And so she said, well, here's where I'm staying, and if you change your mind, I'll be there. Well, this gentleman is watching television in the bar, and lo and behold, he looks up on the TV, and there's her picture.
Police say her motive was simple, money.
And they're talking about what she did, and she fled, and she's wanted. So he picked up the phone and called LAPD.
Hours later, Dorothea's arrested at her Fleabag motel.
She was sitting in an unmarked vehicle. And I remember going over and getting in the vehicle, and the first thing, you know, she said to me was,
I'm sorry, Detective.
She was remorseful, the fact that we had to come down here and all of this that had gone on. And that's all she really said.
The police allege that Dorothea indulged her champagne tastes with the income of her dead tenants. By cashing their Social Security checks, she earned more than $5,000 per month.
She was a substitute payee on the checks of all of the people in her home.
When the people were gone, she was still getting the checks, and she was cashing them.
She had a very nice arrangement, yeah.
One of the people that we did interview was the postal person that delivered the mail. And she told me that when she delivered the mail at the end of the month, Dorothea was always out there waiting. The only one that she was to give the mail to was Dorothea.
And there's a reason Dorothea gave generously to charity.
My goodness, when do you find time for yourself? Because I understand you volunteer at the local community
Yes,
center.
I do. Yes,
We received phone calls from these charitable organizations that said that they were given bags of clothing from Dorothea. Well, what a great way to get rid of evidence.
She collected a lot of money, and she became very proficient, but she also, I think, began to get a little overconfident in her ability.
Between 1985 and 1988, Dorothea's parole agents visit the house more than a dozen times, but they suspect nothing.
It's ludicrous that she was able to operate this house with no license and on federal parole.
The parole agents were the ones that really should have known. They're overworked. I know that, but still, she, got away with murder for a long time.
At first, police believe Dorothea must have had a willing accomplice.
Dorothea, I know if we dig, we're going to find more. I know that. I know that.
Well, I didn't put them there. I couldn't drag a body any place.
I believe that. But I believe there's somebody else involved here.
You know, when you're talking about Burt, he weighed about 250 pounds. Well, how does a person that's 5'3", 5'4", you know, 135 pounds, carrying somebody like that?
One of the boarding house residents, John McCauley, is arrested, but not formally charged.
I think he was in custody maybe for a matter of hours.
There was no doubt in my mind. He had some idea of where she was going or what her plan was. But he wouldn't give up anything. So he was released in the days to follow.
What's clear is Dorothea had many unwitting accomplices, people whose trust she abused.
She had people in the house dig the holes. What did they know? All of her criminal enterprises were done in pieces. And if she needed assistance, she would have someone help her with just one piece of that.
But she wouldn't be so overt or so crude as to say, help me kill this person or help me dispose of this body. She would give you a task and ask you to help with that task. So you had also plausible deniability.
And Dorothea Puente fooled everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Dorothea.
Everybody had a piece of the puzzle, but no one wanted to put it together because Dorothea had that kind persona.
Hizo muchas cosas buenas a la comunidad, económicamente, con comida, con tenerlas en su casa y dando dinero para obras de caridad.
She did things like that to concrete her in as this good person in the community that would rise above any suspicion.
Not everybody that ever lived in Dorothea Puente's house died. I mean, it wasn't like that. So she did have a good reputation.
I think that if Dorothea had been bad-smelling, bearded, and tattooed, they would have been more stringent about her parole. But since she had this sweet little old lady con, and she played that persona so well, she just slid right by them.
These are people that were coined the shadow people by the district attorney who prosecuted the case.
She targeted people that didn't have family.
And that was one of the reasons that Dorothea was able to exploit them, because she knew if she were to plant one of them, no one's going to come around looking for them. She made a mistake with Burt.
She thought that she could get away with getting rid of Burt.
She didn't realize that those people were going to come back and check up on him. And then when he went missing, to check up on him again and again and again. And if it hadn't been for Burt, Dorothea would have been able to continue.
In February 1993, Dorothea Puente is tried on 9 counts of murder.
She told us that she didn't kill anybody. Our explanation is that each of those people that came to her home had pre-existing medical conditions that could have caused a natural death.
But toxicology tests reveal there are traces of a prescription-strength sleeping pill in all the remains. Not lethal doses, but more than coincidence.
Remember that she had a history of drugging and robbing people. She went to 2 different pharmacies using at least two different IDs, picking up prescriptions for herself and for her tenants, living and dead. So it's a pretty good bet that Dorothea was making them cocktails of different medications.
In December 1993, Dorothea is found guilty on 3 counts of murder.
Now, why 3 and not 9? I think that they could never point to any cause of death, but I think the majority of the jurors weighed in with the others and said, hey, there's 9 bodies here, okay? They just didn't fall out of the sky. And I think the strongest evidence the prosecution had was the fact that there were 7 people buried in her yard.
Dorothea is sentenced to life in Chowchilla State Prison, where she dies in 2011. The Ordoricas will always remember her.
I'm glad, I was able to visit her and, her last days I was there. She was a grandmother that I never had.
Burt Montoya finally gets a proper burial.
Little Burt, that was the one that broke my heart because she was mama to him. She treated him like her child. He was a sweetheart.